here we are. Grass court begins immediately. For you as a tennis fan, how do you feel about the surface change over to the grass courts?
It's one of my favorite things about tennis, the fact that you kind of have to stay on your toes with the actual thing beneath your feet. And it rotates from like every quarter of the year. Um, I particularly like this part of the season. Something about the like fresh grass and it just looking pristine is always kind of yielded itself to the best part of the season to me, and it's right around the time I started gaining interest in tennis. Wimbledon was a huge entry point for me, and like a lot of people, I'm sure people feel that way. So I like this part of the season. I wish it didn't feel rushed because, like, as we record this, Wimbledon starts in 2 weeks, and Roland Garros has a lot more of a lead up, and you kind of
Mhm.
massage yourself into that Grand Slam, and then this one, it's like you're 2 feet into the deep end. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think many of us have been advocates of like, let's get some Masters 1000s going on the grass courts. I'd love to see it. Look, Coco Gauff, if we talk about the women's side, she's coming off one of the biggest titles of her career. Something she always dreamed of is winning the French Open. And what an amazing run she had in Paris and withstanding those difficult conditions, breaking down Arena Sabalenka, I'd say physically and mentally. And surely she's going to be carrying a lot of confidence into this grass court season. You look at her past success or lack thereof, though, it's never really clicked for her on the surface. She hasn't won a title, and we haven't really seen the deep run at Wimbledon. Do you think that's something that can maybe change in 2025?
I think she has the confidence to make it change. There are things about her game that I like and can yield themselves to be advantageous on the grass, but there are also at the same time some things in her game that give me a little bit of pause. But she's never gone into Wimbledon as a reigning Roland Garros champion. And I think from like the press tour that she's been on, all the love she's been receiving from peers and other people in sports, I think she just has kind of created a healthy base in herself and her ability on the tennis court. So I think we're gonna see some of that kind of show up in the grass season. At least I'm hoping, but I'm not necessarily ready to go out on a limb and say that she'll be like, a semifinalist at Wimbledon. Would I love
Mhm.
to see that? Do I think that'd be great for the game? Absolutely. But I think she just kind of has to work her way through it. And then the draw at Wimbledon is a huge factor that we don't even know what that's going to look like. So there's some tangibles that kind of need to be laid out before we can see what Coco Gauff does at Wimbledon this year.
Yeah, yeah, well said. I look at your X account and you're sharing some epic highlights of Lindsay Davenport, Venus Williams, like classic 2005 final, probably one of the greatest women's Wimbledon matches
Yeah.
we've ever seen. And you go in 20 years later, and I don't know that we have any women's players right now who have a feel of the surface the way those two do. Do you feel the same way? Are there any names that are maybe standing out to you who play particularly well on grass?
I mean, yes, but also no, because the names that I think play particularly well on grass haven't been the ones holding the Venus Rosewater dish in the past couple of years. I think Ash Barty was somebody whose game really, really was advantageous on grass, but she's no longer on tour. I think Rabakina, also a past Wimbledon champion, she has like a kind of natural game that yields herself to being great on that surface, but her level has been kind of pitchy and up and down the last couple of weeks and months. And then the last two champions, Vondrousova and Krejcikova, I mean, no one would have really picked those as champions before the tournament starts. So the past couple of years, that particular side, the women's draw at Wimbledon, has kind of been up in the air. And then as far as players that play well on grass, I mean, we can get into it, I'm sure, but some of the players that have won already on grass are on this grass swing. I'm not sure if they're going to be the ones like in the final eight, final four, or finals of Wimbledon. So it kind of just the past couple years I've kind of just been buckled up to ready to see what happens really.
Yeah, ready maybe to see a completely new champion, which is what we've sort of been getting. Yeah, you alluded to, I mean, 37-year-old Tatiana Maria, she's a former semifinalist at Wimbledon, and
Mhm.
what a title for her winning at Queen's Club. I want to give a look actually briefly at a couple of the American women. We talked about Coco Gauff. Jessica Pegula is playing this week. She won in Berlin last year, so she's actually defending that title.
Mhm.
Madison Keys, obviously, lifting that weight off her shoulders and winning a Grand Slam title front end of the year. She's played well on grass in the past. Could we see some noise out of these 2 maybe?
Yeah, I actually think their games translate very well to grass, especially in this modern era. Pegula hugs the baseline and kind of hits consistently flat. And I got the chance to see her up close at a tournament she won in Austin right before Indian Wells. And I was blown away at how consistently flat she hits and how much it penetrates the court. If she's playing like that, I like her odds at Wimbledon. She doesn't come in with the most momentum because the clay court season wasn't great, but sometimes it switches on for you. And then Madison Keys, her like power and kind of just explosiveness off of the ball yields itself to great tennis on every surface, in particular grass, if she's feeling good and healthy. I believe she made the semifinals at the women's event in Queens Club and came up short against the eventual champion Tatiana Maria, who is tricky against all sorts of people. But yeah, I definitely would be looking at where those names fall in the Wimbledon ranking and draws in a couple of weeks for sure. They have what it takes. I mean, Pegula gives me a little bit of pause because she's been close to Wimbledon glory before. She got to the quarterfinals, I believe, in 2023 and was, on paper supposed to beat Von Drusela, but it didn't end up that way. Madison Keys has had some heartbreaks there, but now, like you said, she has, the weight off of her shoulders of having a major title. I don't know. It just kind of depends on how it shakes up for them when that draw comes out.
You there?
Yeah, sorry. I think either I froze or you froze. Sorry.
Yeah, one of us froze. Don't worry, we can pick up from where we left off. Let me make a quick transition. We should talk about still the world number 1, and she's made a couple Grand Slam finals this year. Aryna Sabalenka, she's missed out on Wimbledon in the past. She's former semifinalist. You feel like she's been close on that surface before. I don't really know where and there were so many reactions, obviously, to how she handled losing to Coco Gauff in the French Open final. Negative reactions, understandably. I don't know what kind of headspace she's in right now, but is she someone who's kinda like, we flip the switch and we go on a tear right away, or is that potentially gonna affect her kinda latter half of 2025 here?
I'm inclined to believe that she's really good at putting major disappointments behind her because I still remember the Aryna Sabalenka who opened up the 2022 season not being able to get a first or second serve in, and she
Yeah.
ended up, really having a great season, all things considered. And then 2023, she wins her first slam. We've kind of seen her progress. So I think she's really good at that. It's just that sometimes in matches, she can kind of spontaneously combust, if you will. And I actually like she's a player that I think isn't going to be necessarily draw dependent because similar to Madison Keys, who we mentioned earlier, her game is just so big and the grass rewards that very easily. So I think she'll be comfortably into the second week of Wimbledon unless she just has a really, really dire draw. But even still, I would be erring on the side of Sabalenka has what it takes to really go deep at Wimbledon because I think she has grass court titles underneath her belt, and she's a two-time semifinalist at Wimbledon or somewhere thereabouts. So I think she just wants to do well on that surface at that tournament, and she's 0-2 this year in Grand Slam finals. So I'm sure there's some kind of fire burning to get her hands on a major trophy with how well she's been playing.
One player who's obviously she's dominated Paris so impressively with 4 major titles there, and never really seems to make a good transition over to this surface. Wim Fissette is in Iga Swiatek's corner, and I mean, I'm not going to say it's been a brutal 2025 for a lot of other players. Consistently making semifinals, making deep runs at tournaments is fine. That's not the standard, I think, for Iga, and it's not the standard for Wim Fissette. I had Ben Rothenberg last week. He suggested maybe Iga should flat out skip the grass court season. I don't know. Like, is there a chance Swiatek could do anything here? Is it a surface that just like her game just does not work for the grass courts?
I think it's a mixture of her game not necessarily leaning into the things that make a tennis person's or an athlete's game good on grass and her mindset. Like I think the last couple years she's been so keened in, rightfully so, on the clay courts. And then when she comes to Wimbledon, it's a surface in a tournament that just hasn't traditionally, outside of when she won the juniors, been that successful for her. So it's tricky. I wouldn't go personally as far as saying that she needs to skip Wimbledon, but I do think she's at a part of limerence maybe in her career where she can't really take too many losses against her confidence. So if she loses early, again, it'll kind of just feel like what's going on with Iga Swiatek,
Yeah.
and that's not going to be a great space to be in. But she should still at least try, at least to see what happens. You really never know. I mean, the last couple of Wimbledon champions, no one expected how that would happen for them, and it did. So she kind of just has to go out there and play ball. I mean, all things considered, she is already a Hall of Fame tennis player. She's a
Yeah.
really, really darn good athlete out there. So, just go out there and give it a shot and see what happens. But her history at Wimbledon tells you she probably won't be the champion, but you got to go out there and lace them up.
I want to ask you before we shift over to the men's side about some of our Canadian women. It's not really been a good season for Canadian tennis, particularly on the women's side. Leylah Fernandez has been kind of up and down.
Mm.
Bianca Andreescu, the story is always health. Is she healthy or not? She is playing now. You did get a chance to watch Carson Brandstein, who's actually coming off a nice tournament on the grass courts, made the round of 16 and beat a top 20 player for the first time in her career. What were your impressions of Carson? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I think I reached out to you because I wasn't familiar with her or her game, and I believe I caught her in a qualifying match at Miami against Taylor Townsend. Flat ball hitter, from what I remember, so that could be advantageous on grass. Takes big cuts, kind of has like a large wingspan, from what I remember. All of those things in my mind yield themselves to big babe tennis, and grass loves that. So it could be a good swing for her. I wasn't too locked in or tuned into what her grass results had been the last week or so. But if you're saying they're great, I'm a proponent of good Canadian tennis myself. So
There you
hey,
go.
she could definitely do good things, and the sky's the limit. I mean, no one saw Bianca Andreescu coming back in 2019. I remember being at Indian Wells that year, and I saw her beat Stephanie Vogelé like 0-1, and
Oh yeah.
I made a joke with my friends like, if she keeps playing like that, she's gonna win the whole tournament. she
Hey,
won she won the whole thing. So hey, I think there's still a lot to be proud of with Canadian tennis on the women's side and the men's side, which we'll talk about. But the women, like you said, Fernandez has kind of had an up and down season. Andrescu, I thought she might have been getting it going at the Labima Open, but then the loss to Alina Gabriela Russa kind of, shut that down. But you never know. I feel like she's one of those players who thinks Bianca Andreescu, I'm speaking of, I think she's one of those players that thinks highly of herself, as she should. So it's just a matter of staying healthy, being out on the court, and the longer she's able to do that, I think the natural gifts that she has on the tennis court will shine. I hope that she's one of my favorite players to watch.
thank you guys so much for watching us at Matchpoint Canada. If you like our work, follow along, hit the subscribe button below.